Some ghosts don't stay buried. They knock. The rain didn't fall that night. It attacked the glass walls of my penthouse like it had something to prove, each drop hitting hard enough to sound like a warning I couldn't ignore, but I did what I always did. I poured another drink, stood barefoot on Italian marble, and watched the city bend under my name. Because control was the only thing I trusted anymore. Control and silence. The kind of silence that came after losing the one person who ever made me hesitate. The one mistake I buried 3 years ago with my own hands. Or, at least, that's what I believed until the clock on the wall ticked to 2:13 a.m. and something shifted, subtle but wrong. Like the air itself had changed its mind about me. Because no one came to this floor without permission. No one even knew how to get past the private elevator unless I allowed it. And yet, 3 seconds later, there it was. A knock. Slow, deliberate, not loud but certain. Like whoever stood on the other side already owned the moment. And my body reacted before my mind could. Catch up, fingers tightening around the glass. Heartbeat dragging heavier in my chest as I stared at the door like it might disappear if I refused to acknowledge it. But it didn't. The knock came again, softer this time, almost patient, and then her voice slipped through the barrier between past and present. Quiet, steady, impossible. Room service, she whispered, and the world narrowed to that single sound, because I knew that voice. I knew it better than my own. It had lived in my head for 3 years, in memories I never allowed myself to touch too closely, in dreams I never admitted I still had, and yet hearing it now felt wrong. Like hearing a song that should have ended a long time ago. My hand froze on the door handle, cold metal pressing into my palm, as something sharp and familiar climbed up my spine, telling me not to open it, telling me that whatever waited on the other side would break something I'd spent years rebuilding. But I opened it anyway, because I've never been the kind of man who walks away from unfinished things, and the second the door moved, everything I thought I knew shattered without making a sound. She stood there. Olivia Hayes, exactly as I remembered and nothing like she should have been, her dark hair falling over her shoulders, eyes steady, alive in a way that didn't belong to the past, to the grave I visited every year without fail, to the name carved into stone that was supposed to be the end of her story. And yet she was here, breathing, watching me like she had never left, like time hadn't torn us apart and buried the pieces somewhere I couldn't reach. I forgot how to move, forgot how to speak. Because there are things power can't prepare you for, and seeing your dead wife standing at your door is one of them. My voice came out lower than I expected, rough around the edges I thought I'd sanded down years ago. You shouldn't be alive, I said, because it was the only truth I could hold on to, the only thing that still made sense. But she didn't flinch, didn't look confused or afraid. She just tilted her head slightly, studying me like I was the one who didn't belong here. And when she spoke, it wasn't soft anymore. It was controlled, deliberate, dangerous in a way I hadn't seen before. You never saw what really happened that night, she said. And those words didn't hit me all at once. They sank in slowly, like something deeper than shock, something that reached into the past I had locked away and started turning the key from the inside. Because if she was right, then everything I built my life on for the last 3 years was a lie. And before I could stop her, before I could ask the questions burning through my chest, she stepped past me into the penthouse like she still belonged there, like she had never left. And I realized in that moment that the woman I buried wasn't the same one standing in front of me now. She moved like she remembered every inch of the place, like the years between us had been nothing more than a pause she chose to ignore. And I stood there with the door still half open, rain slipping in across the marble floor while my mind tried to catch up to a reality it refused to accept. Because Olivia Hayes was dead. I had seen the reports, signed the papers, stood in front of a grave with her name carved into stone. And yet here she was, walking deeper into my world without asking permission, without even looking back to see if I would stop her, which I should have. I should have said something, done something, but my body felt locked in a memory I could not control. And by the time I finally pushed the door closed, she was already standing near the window, staring out at the city lights like she used to on nights when neither of us could sleep, her reflection faint against the glass, blending past and present in a way that made my chest tighten. "You redecorated," she said softly, not turning around, as if this was a casual visit instead of something that should not exist. and I forced my feet to move, each step heavy, measured, like I was approaching something fragile and dangerous at the same time. "You are not supposed to be here," I said, my voice steadier now, but colder, because control was something I knew how to reclaim, even when everything else slipped. She let out a small breath that almost sounded like a laugh, but there was no humor in it, only something tired, something older than I remembered. And when she finally turned to face me, her eyes held mine without hesitation, without apology. "And yet I am," she replied. Simple, final, like the answer should be enough. But it was not even close, because nothing about this made sense. Not the way she looked, not the way she carried herself, not the fact that she was standing in front of me when I had spent 3 years teaching myself how to live without her. "Explain it," I said, sharper now, stepping closer, searching her face for something familiar, something that would anchor me. But the Olivia I knew had always worn her emotions openly, and this version of her did not. This version was composed, controlled in a way that mirrored me, and that realization unsettled me more than anything else. She glanced down briefly, her fingers brushing the edge of the table as if grounding herself, then looked back up. "If I explain everything right now, you will not believe me," she said. And there it was, that tone I remembered, the one that always meant she had already made a decision and I was just catching up to it. I clenched my jaw, because she was right. I would not believe her, not without proof, not without something real to hold on to. But I was not a man who accepted uncertainty, not anymore. "Try me," I said quietly, and for a moment, something flickered in her expression, something softer, almost like the past trying to surface, but it disappeared just as quickly as it came, replaced by that same calm distance. "3 years ago," she began, her voice steady but lower now, "the night everything ended for you. It did not end the way you think it did." The words landed slowly, each one pulling at something buried deep inside me. Memories I had locked away starting to shift under the weight of doubt, because I remembered that night too clearly, the chaos, the confusion, the finality of it. And yet hearing her say it like this made it feel incomplete, like a story missing its final page. I took another step closer without realizing it, close enough to see the small details I had missed before, the faint change in her expression, the way her breathing stayed, even despite everything. "Then tell me how it ended," I said, and this time my voice was not cold. It was something else, something sharper, more dangerous, because truth was the only thing I could not afford to get wrong. She held my gaze for a long second, as if measuring something inside me, and then she said quietly, "It ended with you walking away before the truth could reach you." And just like that, the ground beneath everything I believed in shifted again. For a second, I thought I had misheard her, because that was not possible, not after everything I had seen, everything I had signed off on, everything I had forced myself to accept as truth. And yet the certainty in her voice did not leave room for doubt. It did not ask for permission. It simply existed. And that was what unsettled me the most. Not her presence, not even the fact that she was standing in front of me alive, but the way she spoke as if the past I had buried was still unfinished. Like I had walked away in the middle of something I should have stayed for. I let out a slow breath, dragging my hand through my hair as I tried to pull control back into place, because confusion was dangerous and I did not survive by being careless with facts. "I do not walk away from things that matter," I said, my voice low, measured, but there was an edge to it now, something sharper, because if what she was saying was true, then someone had rewritten my reality without me knowing, and that was not something I tolerated. Her gaze did not waver, not even for a second. "You did that night," she replied quietly, and the calm in her tone made it worse, because it meant she believed it, completely. Without hesitation, I stepped closer again, close enough that I could see the faint shift in her breathing, the small tension in her shoulders that told me she was not as unaffected as she appeared, and that detail grounded me just enough to keep going. "Then tell me what I missed," I said, each word deliberate, because I needed clarity. I needed something solid to hold on to before this turned into something I could not control. She hesitated, not long, just enough for me to notice, and then she reached into the pocket of her coat, slow, careful, like she was aware of how much weight her next move carried. My body tensed instinctively, not out of fear, but out of habit, Because in my world, every movement meant something. Every detail mattered. But when her hand came back into view, there was no threat in it. Only a small object resting in her palm. Something simple, something familiar, and my breath caught. Before I could stop it, because I knew it immediately. Even before she stepped closer and placed it on the table between us. The ring, my ring. The one I had slipped onto her finger years ago with a promise I had not known how to keep. I stared at it like it might disappear if I looked away, like it did not belong in this moment. This was never recovered, I said slowly, my voice quieter now, because I remembered that detail clearly. It had been one of the things that never made sense, one of the loose ends I had forced myself to ignore because there had been nothing else I could do. Her eyes softened just slightly, but not enough to break that controlled distance she held. Exactly, she said, and that single word hit harder than anything else she had said so far, because it confirmed what I had been trying not to consider, that something had been wrong from the beginning, that the version of events I had accepted had gaps, fractures I had chosen not to examine too closely. I felt my jaw tighten as pieces started to shift in my mind, memories replaying with new questions attached to them, details I had dismissed now pulling themselves back into focus. If you had stayed, she continued, her voice steady but quieter now, like she was stepping into something just as dangerous as I was. You would have seen that there was no body, no proof, only assumptions made too quickly. I looked up at her sharply, because that was not true. It could not be. I had been told there was enough. I had been given confirmation. But as soon as that thought formed, doubt followed it. Because I had not seen everything myself. I had trusted what I was told, and trust was not something I gave easily, which meant something had been wrong for me to accept it so quickly. Who told you to come back? I asked suddenly, because this was not just about the past anymore. This was about now, about why she was here after all this time. Her expression changed then, not dramatically, but enough for me to notice, the calm shifting into something more guarded, more intentional. No one told me, she said, and for the first time since she walked through that door, there was something else in her voice, something heavier. I came back because whatever was hidden that night is not finished yet, and the way she said it made it clear that this was not just about uncovering the truth. It was about something still in motion, something that had not ended 3 years ago like I believed. And in that moment, I realized this was not a coincidence. This was not closure. This was the beginning of something I was not prepared for. The silence that followed her words felt heavier than anything she had said so far, like the room itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what I would do next. And for the first time in a long time, I did not have an immediate answer, because control depends on certainty, and she had just taken that away from me piece by piece, replacing it with questions I could not ignore. I looked down at the ring again, still resting on the table between us. A small, simple object that suddenly carried more weight than everything else in the room. Because it was real, it was proof that something about the past had been wrong, and I did not tolerate mistakes, not mine, not anyone else's, especially not ones that rewrote 3 years of my life. I lifted my gaze back to her slowly, studying her the way I would study a situation I had not yet decided how to handle. Carefully, deliberately, taking in every detail, every shift in expression, every controlled breath, and the more I looked, the more I realized something else had changed, not just the circumstances, but her. Olivia was not the same woman I remembered. The softness that used to define her had been replaced by something sharper, something quieter but stronger, like she had learned to survive in a way I had never seen before, and that realization settled into me with a quiet kind of weight. If this is not over, I said finally, my voice lower now, steadier, because uncertainty does not last long with me. I either eliminate it or I own it. Then why come to me? I took a step closer, not aggressive, not threatening, just enough to close the distance that had been growing between us since she walked in. Why now? The question lingered between us, simple but loaded, because timing was never accidental in my world. Everything happened for a reason. And if she was here, it meant something had shifted, something had forced her out of hiding after 3 years of silence. Her eyes held mine, and for a brief moment, I saw it again. That flicker of something familiar, something that almost looked like the past trying to break through. but she pushed it back just as quickly, her posture straightening slightly, as if she had already decided how much she was willing to give. Me, because you are the only one who was supposed to know the truth, she said, and the way she said it made my chest tighten, not from emotion, but from the implication behind it, supposed to know, which meant someone had made sure I did. Not. Someone had controlled what I saw, what I believed, and that thought alone was enough to shift everything into focus, because I do not get controlled, I do not get misled, not without consequences. I let out a slow breath, the kind that steadies everything inside before a decision is made. Then someone went out of their way to keep me in the dark, I said, more to myself than to her, but she nodded once, confirming it without hesitation, and that was all I needed, because this was no longer just about her being alive. This was about something bigger, something calculated, something that had been unfolding without me for 3 years, and I do not ignore things like that. I do not let them exist without understanding them completely. I turned slightly, walking past her toward the bar, not because I needed the drink, but because movement helped me think, helped me organize the pieces as they started to come together in a way that made sense. If you stayed hidden for 3 years, I continued, pouring the amber liquid into a glass without looking away from her reflection in the window. Then something changed tonight. I set the glass down without touching it, my focus entirely on her now. What are you running from? The question was direct, controlled, and this time, there was no room for deflection, because whatever had brought her back into my life was not small, it was not random, and it was not over. She did not answer immediately, and that hesitation told me more than anything else she could have said. Because Olivia never hesitated unless the truth carried consequences she could not fully control. Her gaze shifted slightly, not away from me, but past me, like she was measuring the space, the exits, the possibilities, and when she finally spoke, her voice was quieter than before, but heavier, like each word mattered more now. I am not running, she said, and something in the way she said it made my instincts sharpen instantly, because it was not denial. It was correction, a distinction that changed everything. Her eyes met mine again, steady, unwavering. I came back because they are about to finish what they started. And just like that, the past was no longer behind us. It was standing right here in the room, waiting to be dealt with. The moment she said it, something cold settled into place inside me. Not fear, not hesitation, something sharper than that, something focused. Because this was no longer about confusion or unfinished emotions. This was about a move being made without me. And I do not exist in a world where moves happen without my awareness. I watched her carefully, every instinct I had built over years rising to the surface, analyzing tone, posture, timing, because Olivia did not come back just to warn me. She came back because she knew something specific, something immediate, and that meant whatever was coming was already in motion. Who are they? I asked, my voice quiet but precise, each word carrying weight, because names matter, details matter, and I needed both. She did not answer right away, and that silence told me more than hesitation ever could. It told me she was deciding how much to trust me, which almost made me laugh, not out loud, but internally, because trust was not something we had. The luxury of rebuilding slowly, not with something like this hanging over us. You came here for my help. I continued, stepping closer, not aggressively, but deliberately, closing the space between us until there was no room left for distance. So do not start holding back now. My eyes stayed locked on hers, steady, unyielding, and for a second, I saw it again, that old spark, the one that used to challenge me, the one that never backed down even when she should have, and it flickered, stronger this time, like the past refusing to stay buried. I am not holding back, she said. But her voice had changed, softer, more personal, like this part mattered more than the rest. I am trying to keep you from walking into something you cannot see yet. That stopped me, not physically, but mentally, because Olivia never underestimated me, never spoke to me like I needed protection. And hearing it now made something tighten in my chest in a way I did not expect. I tilted my head slightly, studying her again, recalibrating everything I thought I understood about this situation. Then make me see it, I said, quieter now, not a demand, but something closer to a decision. Because if she was here, if she had stepped back into my life after 3 years of silence, then whatever she knew was already tied to me whether I wanted it or not. She exhaled slowly, like she had been holding that breath since she walked through the door, and when she spoke again, the words came more carefully, more deliberately. "The night you think I died," she began, her eyes not leaving mine, "was not the night they failed, it was the night they changed the plan." The phrasing hit me immediately, because that was not random, that was intentional, structured, like something organized, something planned, beyond a single moment. And my mind moved faster now, connecting pieces I had ignored, re-examining details I had accepted without question. "Changed it how?" I asked, and there was no edge in my voice this time. Only focus, only the need to understand what I had missed. She stepped closer then, closing the last bit of distance between us, and I did not move back, did not break eye contact, because whatever this was, it required both of us to stand in it fully. "They needed you to believe I was gone," she said, and there it was, the core of it, simple and devastating, because belief is control, and if someone had manipulated mine, then they had been closer than I realized, closer than I allowed anyone to get. I felt my jaw tighten again, not from anger, but from clarity, because this was no longer abstract. This was deliberate, targeted. "Why?" I asked, a single word, but it carried everything behind it, every question, every possibility, every consequence, and this time, she did not hesitate, not even for a second, "Because as long as you were looking for me," she said, her voice steady but lower now, "you were not looking at them." And just like that, the entire situation shifted into something far more dangerous than I had anticipated, because distraction is the oldest strategy in the world, and if I had been distracted for 3 years, then whatever they were doing had already gone too far. For a moment, I said nothing, because there are truths that do not hit all at once. They unfold. They settle into places you thought were solid and make them shift under your feet. And what she had just said did exactly that. It rewrote the last 3 years in a way I could not ignore, because if I had been looking in the wrong direction, then someone had made sure of it. Someone had guided every assumption, every conclusion, every move I made without me realizing it. And that was not just a mistake, that was strategy. I let out a slow breath, my gaze drifting briefly to the city outside before returning to her, sharper now, clearer, because confusion does not last long with me. It turns into focus, and focus turns into action. Then they knew exactly how I would react. I said quietly, more to myself than to her, because it made sense, every detail aligning in a way that was too precise to be coincidence. Olivia watched me carefully, like she was waiting to see if I would reject it or accept it, but I did neither. I processed it, piece by piece, the way I always do. "They needed you alive," I continued, my voice steadier now, but hidden. I looked at her directly, holding her gaze, "and they needed me blind." The words hung between us, and she nodded once, confirming it without hesitation, and that confirmation did not bring relief. It brought clarity, the kind that sharpens everything, that strips away anything unnecessary until only the truth remains. I took a step back, not to create distance, but to think, to let the full weight of it settle into place, because this was not random, this was not chaos, this was deliberate, controlled, planned over time, and that meant whoever was behind it had resources, patience, and access close enough to influence what I saw, what I believed, what I ignored, and that narrowed the field more than anything else. "You stayed hidden for 3 years, I said, turning slightly as I spoke, my mind already moving ahead, already analyzing the implications, which means they believed the distraction worked. I paused, then looked back at her. "So what changed?" The question was simple, but the answer would not be, because something had forced her to break cover. Something had made staying hidden more dangerous than coming back, and that was not a small shift. Her expression tightened just slightly. Not fear, not weakness, something closer to urgency, controlled but present. "They are accelerating," she said, and the word itself carried weight, because it meant whatever had been building was no longer slow, no longer hidden. It was moving towards something final, something immediate, I felt. My jaw set as that piece locked into place, because acceleration means risk, it means pressure, it means mistakes, and mistakes are where truth reveals itself. "Toward what?" I asked, and this time there was no pause, no hesitation, just direct eye contact and a quiet certainty that made the air between us feel heavier. "Toward you," she said, and that should have surprised me. But it did not completely. Because if I had been part of the distraction, then eventually I would become part of the objective. That is how these things work. You do not remove a variable forever. You delay it until the timing is right. And if the timing was right now, then everything we were talking about was already closer than I wanted it to be. I stepped forward again, closing the space between us without thinking, drawn by something I could not fully define. Not just the situation, not just the danger, but her. The fact that she was here, real, alive, standing in front of me after everything. Then, "You did not come back just to warn me," I said, quieter now, because the answer was already forming before she spoke. She held my gaze, steady, unwavering, and this time there was no distance in her expression, no guarded restraint, just truth. "No," she said softly, and something in my chest tightened in response, not from weakness, but from recognition, from understanding what she was about to say before she said it. "I came back because this time," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper but stronger than anything else in the room. "You cannot face it alone." And for the first time since she walked through that door, I realized this was not just about the past coming back. It was about something we were about to walk into together, whether I was ready or not. I did not respond right away, not because I did not have an answer, but because the one forming in my mind was not simple. It was not clean. It was something heavier, something that forced me to look at her differently, not as the past I had buried, not as the mistake I had learned to live with, but as someone who had stepped into something just as calculated, just as controlled as the world I operated in. And that realization changed everything. Because Olivia Hayes was not standing in front of me asking for protection, she was standing here as someone who had survived 3 years inside a lie I did not even know existed. And survival like that does not come without transformation. I studied her again, slower this time, more deliberately, noticing the details I had overlooked before, the way her posture never fully relaxed, the way her eyes tracked the room instinctively, the way she positioned herself where she could see both the entrance and the reflection in the glass behind me. And I understood something then that I had not allowed myself to consider before. She was not just part of this situation. She had been living inside it, adapting to it, learning from it. "You are not the only one who has been watching," I said quietly, and her expression shifted just enough to confirm it. Not surprise, not denial, just acknowledgement. And that was enough for me, because it meant this was not one-sided. It was not just something being done to us. It was something she had been navigating on her own for years. "Then you already know more than you are telling me," I continued, my voice steady but sharper now, because I do not move forward without full awareness, not when the stakes are this high. She held my gaze, and for a second, I thought she might push back, might hold on to whatever she had not yet shared. But instead, she stepped closer, closing the distance in a way that felt intentional, not emotional, not impulsive, controlled. And that control told me more than any explanation could. "I know enough to understand the pattern," she said, her voice low, deliberate, "but not enough to stop what is coming without you." The honesty in that statement landed differently than everything else, because it was not absolute. It was not certainty. It was strategy, and strategy one understand, strategy one respect. I tilted my head slightly, considering her words, weighing them against everything else I had already processed, because trust is not given, it is built, but sometimes it is also calculated, and right now, calculation mattered more than anything else. "Then we stop reacting," I said, the decision forming as I spoke it, because if they had been controlling the pace, controlling the direction, then the only way to break that was to take control back, to shift the dynamic before they expected it. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in disagreement, but in focus, like she was already following the direction I was taking, already anticipating what came next. "We make them react instead," I continued, and this time, there was no hesitation in my voice, no uncertainty, just clarity, because this is where I operate best, not in confusion, not in doubt, but in movement, in action that forces everything else to adjust. She exhaled, slowly, and for the first time since she walked through that door, there was something else in her expression, not just control, not just distance, something closer to alignment. Like for the first time, we were not standing on opposite sides of something, but the same side of something far bigger than either of us alone. "They are expecting you to stay exactly where you are," she said, her voice quieter now, but more certain. "To keep looking backward instead of forward." I nodded once, because that matched everything I had already concluded, everything she had confirmed. "Then we changed that," I said, stepping past her toward the center of the room, my mind already moving ahead, already outlining the next steps, the next moves, because hesitation is where control is lost, and I do not hesitate when I understand the game. I turned back to her, meeting her gaze again, and this time, there was no distance left, no uncertainty, only a shared understanding of what we were about to do. "You came back for a reason," I said, quieter now, but stronger, because this was no longer about questioning her presence. It was about using it, understanding it. "So we use it." And something in the way I said it made her still for just a second, like she had not expected that answer, like she had expected resistance, doubt, something other than acceptance. But I do not waste time resisting what is already in front of me. I use it, I adapt, I move forward. That is how I have always survived. And this time would be no different, except for one thing. This time, I was not doing it alone. The shift between us was subtle but undeniable, like two separate paths finally aligning into one direction. And once that alignment locked into place, everything else followed faster than either of us said out loud. Because this was no longer about catching up to the past. It was about stepping ahead of whatever was coming next. I moved toward the control panel embedded in the wall, my fingers brushing over the glass surface as the city lights dimmed slightly in response. The penthouse adjusting to my command without question, because control is not just about people, it is about environment, about shaping every detail until nothing moves without you knowing. I glanced back at her, watching how she reacted to the shift, not startled, not uncertain, just observant, absorbing everything the way I always had. And that similarity did not go unnoticed. "If they are watching," I said, my voice low but steady, "then they are expecting me to stay predictable." I paused for half a second, letting the implication settle. "So the first thing we do is break that expectation." She nodded slightly, her arms folding loosely as she leaned back against the edge of the table, but her posture was not relaxed. It was calculated, conserving energy, staying ready, and that told me she understood exactly what I meant without needing it explained further. "You still have access," she said, not a question, a statement, and I almost smiled at that, not because it was amusing, but because it confirmed she remembered who I was, what I controlled, what I could reach without anyone realizing it until it was too late. "More than they think," I replied, turning back to the panel, my mind already moving ahead, already mapping out the structure I had built years ago, the layers of information, the networks that extended far beyond what anyone outside could see. Because if they had spent 3 years distracting me, then they had also spent 3 years underestimating what I could do once I refocused, and that was their mistake, not mine. I activated a secure line, the interface glowing faintly under my hand as it processed the request, and even before the connection completed, I could feel her attention shift slightly, not toward the screen, but toward me, like she was measuring something again, recalibrating her understanding of where she stood in all of this. "You are going to draw them out," she said quietly, and this time there was something else in her voice, not doubt, not concern, something closer to recognition, like she had anticipated it, but still needed to hear it confirmed. I turned slightly, meeting her gaze. "They already made the first move," I said, calm, certain. "I am just changing the direction of the board." The connection clicked into place, silent, secure, and I gave a short instruction, precise, minimal, just enough to set something in motion without revealing the full scope of what I intended. Then I ended it just as quickly, because information is leverage, and leverage is only useful when controlled. The room fell quiet again, but it was not the same silence as before. It was sharper now, more focused, like everything inside it had shifted into readiness. I walked back toward her, slower this time, not out of hesitation, but intention, because proximity changes things. It changes how people react, how they think, how they reveal what they are not saying. And when I stopped in front of her, close enough to see the slight rise and fall of her breathing, I realized something I had not allowed myself to acknowledge until now. This was not just strategy, not just survival. There was something else beneath it, something unfinished that had nothing to do with the people watching us. 3 years, I said quietly. Not a question, just a statement. And for the first time since she walked through that door, her composure shifted in a way that was almost imperceptible. But I saw it. I always do. The smallest crack in control. The brief flicker of something she had been holding back. You disappeared. Without a trace. I continued, my voice steady but lower now. And now you walk back and like you never left. She held my gaze. And for a second, the distance between us felt different. Not gone, but changed. Like something else had taken its place, something neither of us had addressed yet. I did not have a choice, she said. And the words were simple, but they carried more than anything else she had said so far. Because choice defines everything, and the absence of it changes everything even more. I studied her for another second, then nodded once, because I understood that, maybe more than she realized. You do now. I replied, and something in my tone made her still again, not from fear, but from the weight of what I was saying, because this was no longer about what had been taken from us. It was about what we were going to take back. And as the city lights flickered beyond the glass, reflecting off the surface between us, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whoever had spent 3 years controlling the narrative had just lost that control, and they did not even know it yet. The room felt different now, not quieter, not calmer, but sharper, like every second carried weight that had not been there before, and I could feel it in the way she stood, in the way I moved, in the way the city outside seemed to flicker just a little slower against the glass, like everything was waiting for the next move to be made. And for the first time since she walked through that door, I was not looking at her as a question that needed answering. I was looking at her as part of the answer itself, something that had been missing from a puzzle I did not even realize was incomplete. Then we do not waste time, I said, my voice steady. Final, because hesitation is where control slips, and we had already given them 3 years of it. I stepped past her toward the center of the room, my mind already outlining the structure of what came next. The points of contact, the patterns of movement, the places where pressure could be applied without revealing intention, because this was no longer about reacting. It was about forcing them to reveal themselves, piece by piece, until there was nowhere left for them to hide. They think they are ahead, I continued, turning slightly so I could still see her in my peripheral vision. So we let them believe that a little longer. She did not respond immediately, but I could feel her attention shift. Not questioning, not resisting, aligning, and when she spoke, her voice carried that same controlled certainty I had started to recognize in her. And when they realize they are not, she said, quieter now, but sharper, it will already be too late for them to adjust. I nodded once, because that was exactly the point. Not confrontation, not force, but timing, precision, the kind that does not give the other side space to recover. I turned back to her fully then, closing the distance again. Because there was one thing left that mattered more than strategy, more than control, more than anything else we had said so far. If we are doing this, I said, my voice lower now, more deliberate, then there are no more gaps between what you know and what I know. My eyes held hers, steady, unyielding, because this was not optional, not if we were about to step into something this calculated. She did not look away, did not hesitate, and for a moment, everything else seemed to fall away, leaving just the space between us and the weight of everything we had not said yet. There are still things you are not going to like, she said quietly, and that almost made me smile, not because it was amusing, but because it was honest, and honesty is more valuable than comfort, especially in situations like this. I am not here to like it, I replied, just as quietly. I am here to understand it. And something in her expression shifted again, not breaking, not softening completely, but changing, like a door opening just enough to let something real through. Then start with this, she said, her voice steady, but there was something deeper behind it now, something that carried more weight than anything else she had told me so far. The person who made you believe I was gone. She paused, just for a second, but it was enough to sharpen my focus instantly, enough to pull every detail of the last 3 years into a single point of attention. Is someone you still trust? The words landed clean, direct, without hesitation, and for a moment, everything inside me went completely still, because there are revelations that shift the ground beneath you, and then there are ones that remove it entirely. And this was the second kind. I did not react immediately, did not move, did not speak, because reaction without certainty is weakness, and I do not allow that. But my mind was already moving, already retracing every connection, every decision, every person who had been close enough to shape what I believed. And there were not many, there never are. Which meant this was not a wide search. It was a precise one, a focused one, and that made it more dangerous than anything else we had uncovered so far. I looked at her again, slower this time, more carefully, because this was the moment everything changed, not just the situation, but the lines between past and present, between trust and control, between what I thought I knew and what was actually true. Then we start there, I said finally, my voice calm. But something colder sat underneath it now, something sharper than before, because betrayal is not just a problem, it is a direction, a path that leads exactly where you need to go if you are willing to follow it all the way to the end. She held my gaze, and for the first time since she walked through that door, there was no distance left at all, no separation between where she stood and where I did, just a shared understanding of what came next. And as the city lights flickered once more against the glass behind her, I realized something with absolute clarity. The past had not come back to haunt us. It had come back to point us forward. And this time, we were not going to look away.